On today's show, where do the Capitals finish the 2025-2026 season and which players are set to have a breakout season? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we look forward to the 2025-2026 season. Yes, we have to put last season in the past. The Capitals got eliminated in the second round and they fell short of the goal. That's all in the past. Where do the Capitals finish in 2025-2026? I'll talk about that. A bit later, we'll talk about what could swing the season. Listen, sometimes the best laid plans go to waste, but right now the optimism is overflowing the Capitals organization. After that, breakout picks for the Capitals. But just to get it going here, where do the Capitals finish in 2025-2026? I think the Capitals are going to take a step forward. Yes, despite many people saying the Capitals are going to take a step back. You know, that last year was kind of a one-off, that the players that put up career numbers, how often do they duplicate that or even exceed those things? Those are the things that we'll talk about in today's show. But let's just dive into the meat and potatoes here, talking about, the big picture outlook. Where do the Capitals finish? Because new season is here and maybe one last lap for one goal-scoring legend. Alex Ovechkin. So let's kind of just set the table here. The Capitals had a massive turnaround last year. We all know that. They were the last team to qualify the year before, the first to qualify last year, top seed in the East, first playoff win since 2018, and then the agony of defeat, the second round exit to the Carolina Hurricanes. And that was a tough one for me as I was drinking the Kool-Aid on the Capitals. And certain doubts started to seep in for me a little bit, right? That I thought the Capitals would have been able to go further. I think that the Canadiens posed, had some more pushback than I had perceived. I didn't know that Carolina was going to be as good as they were. Every year, I shouldn't be surprised, Carolina is a good team. But here's the thing. That wasn't a fluke, what the Capitals did last year, in my opinion. That was structure. That was buying into Spencer Carbery's system. And that's what happens. Those are the fruits of a full buy-in. And what did you see from the Capitals players when they bought into his systems? Well, everything was humming along. He literally took home the Jack Adams Award for that. This isn't just me being a homer. This isn't conjecture. This is stats, or at least, winning the Jack Adams and finishing where the Capitals, that isn't just Dan talking about the Capitals in a favorable way. But that matters because it tells you the identity is sticky and it's going to go that way going into next season, that I think they learned the systems and what the expectations are that were laid out by Spencer Carbery and his assistants. Now, the hard part, of course, is that there's going to be new players in the mix, younger players that are going to have to learn the systems. But I think, if I'm going to talk about last season, I don't think it was a one-off. It was the makings of a foundation of structure under Spencer Carbery. And, talking about big names, Alex Ovechkin, all-time goals king at 897. And that was the chase all season. The Capitals making it to the playoffs, winning the Metro and the Eastern. That was just the byproducts of being invested in Alex Ovechkin's chase. But Alex Ovechkin, going into his 40th year on this planet, his 21st in the league, he's still a power play cheat code that you can count on. That we know that Alex Ovechkin is going to set up from the left dot, and yet netminders are struggling to stop it. And If you take a look at it, we're going to talk about usage for Alex Ovechkin because the usage has been smarter when it comes to him. They don't just put him out there all the time. They understand in many cases less is more when it comes to the grade eights. So what happens? Break it all down. Fewer minutes, higher efficiency, better production. So don't expect him 22 minutes a night. I think what is a reasonable expectation is 17 or 18, and that's okay. And the key to his success down the middle, of course, is Dylan Strome. And he set the tone last year. The player that plays with finesse, the player that has the high hockey IQ, the player that slows down play and makes the right decision is the player that elevated Alex Ovechkin post Nicholas Backstrom. He led the team in points, playmaking through the neutral zone, just huge. And those little cutback entries that buy you your winger space, that's his bread and butter, and that's why he still deserves to be in the driver's seat at 1C. Behind him, it's just like a sandwich of success, if you will, for the Capitals, is Pierre-Luc Dubois. The Capitals, they bet big on a change of scenery for Pierre-Luc Dubois that we know was a mismatch in the City of Angels, and a bigger role, and flip the switch. The fit in LA never fit. It fit with the Capitals here. He has to transport the puck, finish net front, and be violent on retrievals. That's exactly how Carbery wants his second unit to play. On the back end, the faith is put in the Capitals. On the back end, Martin Fehérváry signed that monster 7-year extension. The fact that he's not going to be 100%, or at least when I record that is what is said, is that he's probably not going to start the season right away, that he's still dealing with some inflammation. But signing that 7-year extension, that is a vote of confidence. That tells you everything about the blue line core, that Martin Fehérváry is a key piece. He and John Carlson anchor the heavy minutes. And then also in that mix, the next wave in Martin Fehérváry is Rasmus Sandin, a big contributor. Jakob Chychrun, the new addition that was as advertised and better, in my opinion. Those two round out a top four that can move pucks and kill cycles. In that mix as well, talking blue line is Matt Roy for defensive conscious, and you've got balance. You've got the offensive-minded defenders. You got the defensive mind blue liners on the team, and I think that they work together very well. And it's not just names, it's roles, and roles win in January. And it's also the tandem that you have in net. Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren exceeded expectations, I think, of most every quote-unquote NHL insider. Logan Thompson, who for large swaths of the season was in the conversation for Vezina, that he elevated his game. He was hungry to prove that he was better than the Vegas Golden Knights sold him out to be. And Charlie Lindgren, of course, continues to do Chucky things, even that wasn't his best season last year, in more of a 1B role, that he still has the confidence of the Capitals organization to get starts. And not because Logan Thompson's injured. It is just that, a 1A, 1B situation that I think that keeping the netminders fresh is what is of paramount importance. But that tandem, cost-controlled, competent, and it's real competition for starts. The thing you know about Thompson, calm edges, Lindgren's battle and broken plays, they complement each other perfectly. And, when you look at it, it's not just happenstance. It's not throwing a dart at the board. They put the netminders in there that have the greatest success versus teams that they play well against historically. They split the load early, ride the heater later, is my opinion. That's what we saw last year anyway. That I expect them to split the workload, but when it gets down to crunch time, you want to go with more of what the sure thing is. That is why you saw Logan Thompson get a bit more of the starts in the latter part of the season. That's the plan. But big picture, I'm calling out 100 to 110 points. Early take here. Metro Hunt, top half special teams, 5-on-5 shot share, maybe break even, but quality chances lean Capitals because of finishing talent. That is the model. So now I'm curious out there. Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or on YouTube. What's your number? Where do the Capitals finish as far as points are concerned? 104, 107? That I think that there's nothing out there that makes me believe that the Capitals are going to take a step back. The players that they subtracted were of little importance. They weren't impactful, even though that's not a word, that they didn't have great impact. You take a look at the minus of Mangiapane. You take a look at the minus of Radish and Alexiev and, down in Hershey, Charlie Lindgren, these kind of guys that, they were a part of the pie that led to the success. But I think the players that they have in the youth and the players that they acquired, like Sourdif and Declan Chisholm, I think that they could be even better than what the Capitals had last season. All right, so coming up here after the break, what could swing the season for the Capitals? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There's so much to love. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. So, say it's the Commanders or the Ravens, it makes it fun to watch. But say if you want vested interest in all of the games, even the lowly Browns, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, they got that much more exciting. It's quick, it's easy to use, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays if you don't have enough already. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about what could swing the 2025-2026 season as the vibes, the youth is all about vibes. I wasn't feeling the vibe. The vibes surrounding this team right now, I think, are positive. We could be entering into the final season of Alex Ovechkin, and every game is going to be a must-watch game. Every shift, every game, every series, you want to see what Ovi and the Capitals put up. But let's dig into the question that keeps me up at night. First one, Ovechkin's usage and power play evolution. We saw lower time on ice, higher efficiency approach work last year. The question is, can they keep him fresh and dangerous? I'm talking Alex Ovechkin as he is entering in, like I said, into his 40th year on the planet, 21st year in the league. Can they do that? Can they keep him healthy? The Russian machine that never breaks, well, he broke a bit last year, didn't he, with that collision with Jack McBain of the Utah Hockey Club, but still did the darn thing by catching and passing Gretzky. The bumper spot and weak side seam have to stay dynamic. If the second unit chips in, the whole PP becomes harder to scout. Talking about Strome and Dubois conversation, who is going to be the number 1 and number 2, respectively? I'm talking first line center and second line center. There isn't really drama. It's, just the opportunity and optionally what the Capitals plan on doing. If Dubois starts bullying matchups and that line clicks, Carbery could spread minutes closer to even. I think that, of course, Strome is the front runner. It should surprise no one to be the first line center, as the chemistry, the rapport, and just the basic compatibility, I guess I would say, with Alex Ovechkin. But if Strome keeps feeding Ovi and Wilson like last year, don't fix what isn't broken. Sometimes people, they just overthink things. Like things were going well, and you're like, how about if it even went better if I did this? Seems to me in real life that is rarely the case. But then we've got middle 6 finishing. They re-signed Beauvillier, right? That was the consolation prize to not signing Nikolai Ehlers, in my belief. And I'm not saying that is a knock. I'm not dunking on Anthony Beauvillier. I'm not saying it is a pejorative. But what I am saying is, Beauvillier came here, and I'm just going to be honest with you, exceeded my expectations. That was the only move that was made on the trade deadline. And, we can argue about if that was the right move. Some would say they should have made more. But Beauvillier, who played on a line at times with Sidney Crosby, you thought to yourself, well, there's something here, right? I mean, I remember back to his time with the Islanders and then a guy that bounced around a little bit. But what did we see? At times he was playing the top line with the great eight. So it's there. And then in that same pot, they added Justin Sourdif, who's sneaky good at driving play, or at least in the limited play that we've seen. But the question is finishing. If Connor McMichael can take another step and one of the kids sticks, that's a swing of 1 or 2 goals a week. That Connor McMichael, who put up record career numbers, shall we say, last season, if he can duplicate that or even take a step forward into the dynamic player that we know that he is, that changes the standings math. Blue line, same story. Pairing and puck movement are the hinge. You take a look at it. I think that there's not a lot of qualms or complaints rather about the blue line. But if Chychrun can clean up those defensive zone retrievals and Sandin continues growing, this team spends way more time on the offense, as it should. Chychrun, a guy with some offensive flair, and Sandin understanding that he's not Erik Karlsson that he hoped that he was when he was younger. He understands his role. And the goaltending cadence as well is another thing, that it is the perfect fluctuation between or alternating. The vacillation of Thompson and Lindgren is a true tandem. And I think that that's something that shouldn't be undersold there, that is huge. Some teams out in the NHL, if you can believe it, don't have a really solid number one. If one gets hot, ride it for a stretch. Say Chucky takes a dip, then you got to ride Thompson for a while. But I think ideally it's a 1A, 1B situation. Sonny Milano back from injury gives you a crafty utility winger, right? That what we saw from Sonny Milano at camp thus far is the best version of Sonny Milano. Is it good enough to crack the roster that is burgeoning forward with youth and also sprinkled in with some veterans, if you will? Some have more veteran experience than others. It's going to be difficult for Sonny Milano to make his way to this team. I'm not ready to count him out. I would never do that because what we've seen, and I want to judge based on what I have seen here recently, he looks really good in camp. The ball's in his court. Can he seize the day? The Capitals, they went out and addressed the blue line. As we know, Martin Fehérváry got injured, and when they went into the cabinet, what did they pull out? A fresh cup of Alex Ovechkin. That they should have left that in there. Declan Chisholm, depth D with real upside. So when you know what hits the fan, you can reach out for Declan Chisholm, and hopefully you have what you're looking for. Those aren't headlines. They're insulation. The insulation wins in February. And one more thing, the Metro Arms Race. As there's teams this offseason that got better. Carolina's not going anywhere. I expect the Rangers to take a step forward as well. It's going to be interesting, to see who comes out. The Devils, and I'm talking about, the Penguins. They're going to try to prove that they're no slouch either. So Carolina reloaded. The Rangers are still the Rangers. Jersey's push is real. The Caps don't have to win the division to be dangerous. I think that oftentimes we get hung up on President's Trophy, and ultimately it's an accomplishment, right? We won the President's Trophy. Ask the Rangers if they care about winning the President's Trophy a couple seasons ago when they had the season they had last season. Sometimes it just doesn't matter year over year. But staying clear of the 2-3 matchup in round one, that would be nice. That's the thing. And we know that all roads are going to go through Carolina, right? And the Capitals have got to find a way to be good enough to get through there. So what are the questions? Hit me up on Twitter as a Capitals fan, maybe a conspiratorial negative Capitals fans. What are the things that keep you up at night? Is it Ovi's usage? Dubois' impact? Those kind of things. Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or on YouTube. Tell me what you're feeling hopeful for, but what are the things that keep you up at night as a Capitals fan? Like, I wish they would have taken care of this or that. I'd sure love to hear from you. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about breakout picks straight ahead. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer the questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. In the final segment of today's show, who steps up, kids, risers, and breakout picks, as this season is going to be the thing that the Capitals have talked about, for years, that we're going to lean into the youth, and then they never do it. They do. It's the coaching with Laviolette. He only wanted to go with a sure thing, and then all of a sudden the Capitals realized enough. We've done that. We've tried the 2018 team, and we've tried to retread that tire with various different players. It's time to embrace the youth. So my favorite part of this time of year is talking about who steps up. Let's start with the man himself, Connor McMichael. Breakout watch is on. I think there is an absolutely distinct possibility he takes on that third line center role, and I think he seizes the day. The third line that was the weakness for the Capitals last year will be revered as one of their strengths. Wow, you want to talk about a bold take? I think that is the case. He flashed last year, better pace, better touches under pressure, more shot volume. If he hits 20 goals, that's the secondary scoring bump this team needs. And I expect him to grow. Can he duplicate his success from last year? I think so. That's the case. Another player that we got a glimpse of towards the latter part of the season is Ryan Leonard. This guy turned pro last year, showed up with the Capitals, and was a key addition to this team. Big frame, big motor. He is a camp player that I think could surprise a lot of us. I think that the early projection is, third line right wing, but I wouldn't say that top six minutes are out of the question for him, at least in the preseason. If he forces their hand, you might see him in a top six role. I guess it remains to be seen. And then you take a look at Ivan Miroshnichenko, and you talk about his sustainability, right? We talk about Ivan all the time. I always speak optimistically about him, thinking that it's going to be his season, and it's never sustainable. The question is, can he win enough wall battles to stick? Can we see that sustainable play that we saw with him in Hershey, that he is fully acclimated, in my opinion, to the North American game? That was always the thing, wait some time. He's not acclimated to the North American game. I think he is. Now's the time to make good on that. Give him a playmaker, give him a retriever, and let him shoot against some of the best out there. Next, we're going to talk about Andrew Crystal, the guy that also has the great high hockey IQ, a guy that I already have penciled in on the second line left wing position. The vision is real. And if he sneaks into that second line left wing, it could change the look completely. Again, I talked about this. I recorded it in an upcoming show. I'm talking about, could you imagine a line of Andrew Crystal left wing, Pierre-Luc Dubois at center, and Ryan Leonard on the right wing? That's your second line out there. I think that could be most impressive. It's something that already gets me rather excited. And then you take, in addition to another younger talent that the Capitals acquired, Justin Sourdif, who is penciled in to be on that fourth line with Dowd and Duhaime. I think that he is going to be a game changer, but it's not going to have any gimmies, right? I think that Justin Sourdif is here. The Capitals put the faith in him by trading away 2 draft picks to acquire him. We know that he would have to clear waivers, all those kind of things. That I think he's here, but he's going, regardless, he's going to have to earn it. Fehérváry, I expect the Capitals to take steps forward with that new contract, a foundational piece. The perception is that Martin Fehérváry is a long-term piece of this team. I don't think that's really up for debate. And, when we talk about the blue line in general, it's in a really good spot. There's a couple of question marks, like I've talked about before, with Carlson and Trevor Van Riemsdyk entering into contract years. But big picture, really great. And Sandin keeps growing. And both of those guys, if Fehérváry and Sandin can keep going out there playing solid minutes, I think the Capitals are going to be a problem for a lot of teams in the NHL. And one last name out there as well is Pierre-Luc Dubois. If PLD hits 60-plus points and controls matchups, everything else becomes easier. It changes how you deploy Strome. It makes Ovi's life easier. And if you give him another net front hammer on PP1, that is something. Like I've talked about in this thing, I'm talking about, game changers, that kind of thing. Is goaltending, can Logan Thompson continue to be sustainable in 25-26? High water mark for him last year. Take a look at it. Various points of the season, the best netminder in the NHL. If he gives you a 915 and a calm presence, the team's ceiling is really high. And that is what has me, feeling so optimistic. In net, your team plays confidently if you have a really rock-solid netminder, and not if you don't. We saw that with Samsonov and Vanacek before. We saw that with Kemper before. To have a safety net in Charlie Lindgren is ideal. Again, I can't say this enough. Some teams don't have a really solid number one. So I think that is huge. But final projection, I'm saying 104 points, second in the Metro, win around maybe 2 if health cooperates. The window isn't wide open, but it's open. And I think that the Capitals need to seize the opportunity. But hit me up on Twitter. Who are your breakout picks? Is it McMichael, Leonard, Sourdif? I want to hear from you. I want this to be a back and forth. I love to hear from the listeners and viewers of this show what your thoughts are. I think that, a lot of it is going to be determined on if they can duplicate the previous year's success. I'm talking about the players that put up career numbers last year: McMichael, Dubois, Protas, Tom Wilson, these kind of guys. That a lot of it is just depending on that. Listen, it's still Spencer Carbery here. It's still the same systems, and the additions outweigh the subtractions that this team faced in the offseason. I'm feeling optimistic about the Capitals, and I think you should as well. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.